Assalamu alaikum, welcome back. Welcome to Ahlulbayt Live on Ahlulbayt TV with myself, Rebecca Masterton, and my guest tonight is Brother Arif Chandoo, and we're going to be talking about the life and the martyrdom of Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam, as in the last few days it has been the date of his martyrdom, his passing away. And of course we know that he was one of the most prominent teachers in his time. Owing to the circumstances, he was able to really consolidate the Ja'fari madhab for those who came afterwards. So inshallah we're going to be looking at various aspects of his life to get to know this Imam and what he contributed again to the establishment of Islam in very difficult times, or we could say the confirmation of the message of Islam that was intended by the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family. So do feel free to call in with any questions or comments. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. All praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds, the Sustainer of the universe. He who existed before bringing everything else into existence, and He who shall remain after everything else has perished. May His choicest blessings, mercy and salutations be upon the last of His messengers, the best of His creation, the mercy unto the world's Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa wasallam. And may He extend His blessings, mercy and salutations upon the pure and immaculate family of our beloved Prophet, His Ahlulbayt, about which the Holy Prophet has said, "My Ahlulbayt are like the Ark of Noah, whoever set sail is indeed with them is indeed saved, and whoever remains behind shall perish." And on this sad and tragic day, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to explicitly and specifically send His blessings, mercy and salutations upon Imam Jaffar ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq. For on the 25th of Shawwal in the year 148 AH, Imam was martyred at the hands of Al-Mansur Dawakini in Medina. He is buried next to his father Muhammad al-Baqir and his grandfather and great-grandfather Imam Zain al-Abidin and Imam Zain al-Abidin's uncle Imam Hassan in Jannat al-Baqi in Medina. And I like to offer all the Muslims of the world my sincerest condolences on the passing of Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq, for indeed his contribution was one that benefited the entire Muslim population. No matter which sect Muslims belong to today, they can find some of their teachings and some of their history can be traced back to Imam Jaffar ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq. And my salams, of course, to all the viewers, respected viewers.
Okay, thank you very much, and again for reminding us, of course, of his lineage. Again, reflect, as you said, like all Muslims can trace back, a lot of the teachings, whatever madhab they have, they can trace that back to Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam. Although again, it can be argued that he has not been perhaps given enough emphasis by all Muslims. He hasn't been given the attention by all Muslims. And again, I certainly know that before I came to the path of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, it was very rare to hear about Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam, which is a great loss for everyone. So regardless of what path you follow, what madhab you belong to, it's incumbent to look at his life, because he was the descendant of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, his family, and inshallah, we were looking at what he contributed in his time.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, Imam Jaffar ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq was a great heavyweight in personality amongst the Muslim scholars, academics, indeed amongst even the Imams. He has a greater prominence because of the various opportunities that he had during his life to preach and to spread knowledge. But no matter who was Imam Jaffar ibn Muhammad as-Sadiq, for Muslims in general, he's a great unifying figure, because from his father's side, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, his lineage is to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. And through his mother's side, Farwa, her father was Qasim, who was the son of Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr, who was the son of Abu Bakr. So his mother's side can be traced back to Abu Bakr, and his father's side to Amir al-Mu'mineen. And in this way, he appeals to both, of course, the Shia and the Sunni, because he has both lineage in him. What is interesting, and maybe one of the reasons why sometimes he doesn't get enough prominence, but in another respect he should be honored even greater for, is that he was born on the same date as the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on the 17th of Rabiul Awwal, and that is the birth date of our holy Prophet. Now, generally the Shia, when we come to that particular date, we tend to remember our beloved Prophet, and not so often that is also the birth date of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And maybe we should have, although they were born on the same day, have celebrations on 2 or 3 days, or extended celebrations, so we remember both personalities and their contributions. In honor of Imam Sadiq, I want to present a verse from the glorious Quran, which is quite interesting. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Tawbah, verse 32, he says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, yuridun an yutfihu nur Allahi bi afwahim wa ya'ba Allahu illa an yutima nurahu walau kariyal kafirun. He says they desire to extinguish Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's light with their mouth, but Allah will not allow for this to happen except to perfect His light, even though the unbelievers are averse to this. Now the 17th Rabiul Awwal, the birth of a holy prophet, was a new dawn in world civilization. It was the end of the beginning of the end of Jahiliyyah and falsehood and ignorance and all those practices and beliefs that bogged down the Arabs of that time. And ever since he brought Islam, the Prophet was described as this light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Quran was that he brought with him from Allah was the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The unbelievers tried to extinguish this light by attacking the Prophet, trying to kill the Prophet on numerous occasions. We know how they wanted to assassinate the Prophet. After he passed away, they thought that the light of Allah was now extinguished, but it passed through his daughter Fatima al-Zahra salamullahi alayhi and Amir al-Mu'mineen. When they were killed, they thought the light was extinguished. It went to Imam Hassan. Then Yazid tried to extinguish it permanently in Karbala with Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Then the light passed Imam Sajjad, who survived, and Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam. And then at the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, all of a sudden this flame, this light that Allah talks about in this verse, had the opportunity to flourish and to shine. For that 17th Rabiul Awwal, that date when he shared his birthday with the Holy Prophet, was as if a new dawn in Islam began. That these opportunities and circumstances came about such that the teachings, the knowledge, the lessons of the Holy Prophet and the Ahlulbayt, which were there, but previous Imams and the Prophet didn't have the opportunity to express them or to teach them. All of a sudden, these opportunities arose during, as we shall discuss, during the time of Imam Sadiq. And this flame that Allah talks about, that He shall perfect His light, once again, in this light shone brightly throughout the world, such that this was known as the golden age of Islamic knowledge and teachings. And indeed, the Islamic world was influencing knowledge and learning throughout the world at that particular time. Scholars and students were coming from Europe, from India, from China, from Iran, to study in the dars and the classes of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam.
Alayhi salam. I mean, it's amazing to think, and of course, there are his very, very, very famously his scientific teachings as well, especially the issue of the earth being round as opposed to flat, and of course, this has been one of the big arguments against religion in Europe, where Europeans have said, well, how can we trust the church? How can religion be right when we had this big debate about the earth being flat or the earth being round? But then, and this was going on centuries later, and here we have record of when he was quite young, and he had already demonstrated in the 8th century that the earth was round. I mean, he'd calculated it, and
absolutely. I mean, his knowledge was profound. I mean, if we go back even to his birth, it's we have narrations that say that he used to converse with his mother from the womb. Wow. And right from a young age, he would be groomed by his grandfather for up till the age of 12. His grandfather, Imam Sajjad, Imam Zainul Abidin, was taking care of him, was mentoring him, was grooming him. Of course, Imam Sajjad wrote Sayf al-Sajjadiyya and Risalat al-Hukuk, two great pieces of works which would have influenced Imam Jaffar Sadiq at a young age. And then after the age of 12, he was under the care of his father, Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam. But he was attending their lessons and their darses and their classes from a very young age. It says from the age of 2 or 3, he would be seen sitting and listening. And, you know, we have narrations that say that his favorite childhood game, which is, I think was quite unique, was that when he played with his friends, he would pretend to be the teacher, probably copying his father or grandfather, and the other children would be students. And the game would be such that he would describe an object, a fruit or something else, without naming it, and the students would have to guess what that object was. And whoever got it right would have the opportunity to become the teacher. And in this way they played. Now this was his one of his most favorite games. But the fact that, you know, he tried to emulate being a teacher showed that the great influence that his father and his grandfather were having on him, such that he was interested in knowledge and acquiring knowledge from such a young age. And he first officially got enrolled into his father's classes, although he attended informally when he was younger, at the age of 11, which was, he was the youngest student. And in his first day, when he attended class, he began to debate with his father's older students, and this is where the narration that you mentioned about the earth being flat. In fact, the church, Ptolemy and Aristotle, you know, believed that the earth was the center of the universe, the sun and all the other planets rotated around the earth, and they said that it was flat. And for 1800 years, you know, this misguided belief was being taught in Europe and around the world. And the church particularly bought into it because the fact that they believed it because Jesus Christ was sent to the earth, him, you know, being a prophet, or which they believed the Son, the Father, and the Holy Ghost, it had to be the center of the universe because Jesus was sent there. And so they reinforced this belief. Even though at the time many scientists were questioning, they were called heretics, and many of them were killed and burned. Anybody who questioned this belief, you know, was defamed or discredited. But at the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, at a young age, he calculated, he said, and he debated with all the students that it can't be right. He said that if the earth was flat, then how can the sun rise in the east and set in the west? How can, you know, the sun shine in the day and set at night? And he presented his calculations to his students, and they had several debates, and, you know, his father was intently listening. And Imam Sadiq, at a young age, you know, proved to have the intelligence and the foresight to understand and grapple with these great issues that faced the entire humanity. Another interesting issue which he raised at the age of 12 was he challenged the belief of Aristotle, which was that there were 4 elements that the entire universe was created, that it was earth, fire, wind, and there was one, water. These were the 4 elements that everything was formed from. And Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, you know, disproved that in fact none of them were elements, and that, you know, there were many elements, not just 4. And as we know, students of chemistry will know that they're taught the table of elements, that, you know, there's so many metals that are, you know, themselves are elements in their own right, that neither of the 4 that Aristotle mentioned, where that air was composed of oxygen and other gases, that the earth had different metals inside it, that water in fact was, you know, hydrogen and oxygen, H2O. And so he disproved it. And in fact, he came to discover, or, you know, spend a lot of time looking at the subject of air, and, you know, did a lot of work on oxygen to prove that in fact oxygen was what kept human beings alive, what sustained creation. He identified that it wasn't the only gas in the air, that there were other gases like hydrogen, small quantities, that were important in allowing human beings to breathe. He also identified that it was the heaviest of all the gases, oxygen. And of course, in the 18th century and 17th century, 19th century, this was actually proved by Western scientists.
Right.
But you know, these teachings can be found in the works of Imam Sadiq, to the extent that a few years ago, 20 or 30 years ago, in the University of Strasbourg, a lot of Western scholars and scientists, they prepared a thesis or research into the life of Imam Sadiq and all his works, and they came to prove, in fact, that a lot of his scientific teachings and research were in fact true and can be credited back to him.
Wow.
And that he was the forefather of a lot of science and chemistry and literature and logic and mathematics that the world enjoys today can be traced back to him.
Yes, and again, you know, looking at, of course, the whole narrative of the progress of Western science and everything, which actually, you know, relied for many centuries on the discoveries that were made in the Muslim world. And I think this is coming out in, you know, in the Western world now. They're starting to realise that, you know, again, a lot of the science goes back to the Muslim world. But with regard to, again, Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam, it's a shame that there hasn't been more of a so in-depth study done, and that he's not taught in universities, you know, scientific contribution as well in universities for people who are studying the sciences.
I think, you know, certainly this is a responsibility on the Shia leadership and
Yeah.
in fact all Muslims today to sponsor seats at universities or professors, or you know, where they study his life and they present his teachings and look at his contribution to modern science as we note there, because we'll find his works in a lot of the historical books, the accounts of his contributions. I mean, nearly all the books at the very minimum mention that he had 4,000 students.
Yeah.
Studying in his hawza or his madrasa and academies. Now that is the lowest number that is mentioned. In some narration it said it goes up to 30,000 that attended his lectures. Now, you know, this was a phenomenal contribution to knowledge, because if you think about it today, I mean, when I was at university, the lecture halls, the lecturers at best could give lectures to 150 students at a time. And you know, these university lessons would go on for, you know, to get a degree would be 4 years. But in a space of 68 years, the time which he lived, we're talking about 4,000 at the very minimum scholars and academics and literates who went on to themselves become, you know, great personalities, to write many books. And then he was their teacher and their instructor. It just gives you an indication of the struggle and the jihad and the caliber of this personality, that he was able to, you know, to influence so many people.
And again, something that needs to be done is to look at a lot of his well-known students, and you can see their names being mentioned in you know, the texts such as Al-Kafi. You can see these names coming up, Hisham ibn Hakam being one of the most famous, and it's kind of evident that when you know, that he did actually train his students he trained them in the sciences, and he also trained them to discuss and debate. And there are also, I've noticed, conversations where, you know, he's holding one student back because he's not quite ready, but he's telling another to go out. But we're just coming up to the break now, so inshallah, after the break we'll continue to, you know, look at his life and remember. You know, it's important not just to remember the martyrdom, but to remember, you know, his life and what he's you know, given to the world and to the lovers of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam. So we're just about to go to break, and we will break for about 15 minutes for Maghrib. Inshallah, we will be back again afterwards. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Ahlulbayt live on Ahlulbayt TV, and we are remembering Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam around the anniversary of his martyrdom. And again, of course, you look at some of the books written by some historians on the Ithna Ashari, the 12 school, and they do actually even cast doubt on the fact that the Imams of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam were poisoned. But again, you know, when this is again something that is happening in the history books, and this is happening in books written on Shiism for an English-speaking audience. So this is why it's important for us to study the lives of the the Imams of the Ahlulbayt alayhim salam of the 12 of school to understand why there were 12, what their lives were, how how were they actually martyred, what were their circumstances as well. And so we have with us Haji Arif Chandoo, and we're just going to again, we're talking about Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam's teachings. In fact, we just had a call in from Africa for someone asking a little bit more information on who he was or his father, etc. And of course, we have many callers coming, tuning in, and perhaps they might want to know more about who he was. So if we were going to introduce him to someone who maybe hasn't heard of him or doesn't know so much, maybe a couple of sentences.
Yeah, Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam was the 6th Imam in the Shia Ithna Ashari faith. His father was Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, Baqir al-Ulum. He was known as the splitter of knowledge. So the Islamic sciences and the expansion of Islamic knowledge and literature was started by his father. Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam's father was Imam Zainul Abidin, Imam Sajjad. Both of them were present at the tragedy of Karbala. So Imam Muhammad Baqir alayhi salam was 3 years old when the incident of Karbala was taking place. His father, Imam Zainul Abidin or Imam Sajjad, was in his early 20s, and in Karbala is where Yazid tried to destroy and eliminate and wipe out the family of the beloved Prophet of Islam and extinguish this light, which we talked about in the verse that I mentioned. Completely tried to extinguish it by act of miracle or by Allah's grand plan. Imam Sajjad was saved, and the light continued. Imam Sajjad's father was Imam Hussein alayhi salam, who was the grandson of the beloved Prophet of Islam, and he had a brother called Imam Hassan. The two flowers of paradise, the youth of paradise, as they were Sayyid Shabab Ahl Jannah, they were described by their grandfather. Their father was Imam Ali alayhi salam, and their mother was Bibi Fatima alayhi salam, who was the daughter of our beloved Prophet. So that's a bit of a history or lineage of our 6th Holy Imam.
Thank you very much. So yes, he was the descendant of Lady Fatima and Imam Ali alayhi salam, and from there, the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family. And again, this is why people call him Ya Ibn Rasulillah, oh son of the Messenger of Allah, is how they would address him when they wanted to ask him a question as well. I've just been told that there's a caller on the line. I don't know if the caller is still there. Is the caller still there? Assalamu alaikum.
I just wanted to know, I've been watching your show quite a lot, and I've been watching another Ahlulbayt as well, but normally they're in Urdu sometimes, so they find it difficult to understand me. But what I've noticed that they were talking about the Alamat Zahur, and you're talking about the Martyrdom of Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq, and also see the 14 Divines in your show. I watched that as well. And this is something very new to me because I don't know about it, because I wasn't brought up with it and no one told me about it. As far as I was concerned, is in my adolescence, I found out what Islam was really about, and then it was like we just celebrate Ramadan, and then it was Eid, and then you go to Hajj. And now, because I'm learning about it, yes, I want to improve my Arabic, because they say Arabic is the best, because then you know how to understand it better. That's something, I know how to read Arabic, but it's not so great, and I'm trying to learn the meaning, so that's the best, because it's a speech. But then also, I'm very interested, because these 14 Divines and Martyrdom of Imam and Mehdi and even the Jal and all that, I'm interested. This is fascinating me, and I want to learn about it. I do go to YouTube and I watch other things, but I don't want to mention names. But sometimes there's a confusion, because also in my Pakistani culture, being a Sunni Muslim, I've also noticed now, and even growing up when I was young, that it's a lot of conflict. People fight over castes as well, and culture differences. And then it's like, then I'm finding out the real Islam is the best, and I want to follow the real Islam, and I want everyone to know about it. I want everyone to follow the real Islam. But also want to know the Quran and Sunnah, is that the best way to start? Is that number one?
Right. Well, yes, I mean, where to start? I mean, again, we've got the hadith of Thaqalain, the hadith, as it's called, the hadith of the two precious things that the Holy Prophet said, and which was recorded both in Sunni and Shi'i texts. I mean, I myself, when I converted, I was Sunni for 4 years. So, and I attended quite a lot of, majalis, and I was very interested in studying. And in those years of majalis, I very rarely, if ever, heard about, the Imams, the descendants of the Holy Prophet, or this aspect of history. So, it's just, well, it was like it was something that didn't exist. So for me personally as well, it's been a sort of a journey of discovery for the last kind of 10 or 11 years. So, the best thing to do is to, yes, of course, Holy Quran, and Ahlulbayt. Why Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, said the Ahlulbayt, meaning, and he said Itrati Ahlulbayt as well, meaning my descendants Ahlulbayt, so that he was including specific members of his descendants in that category, is because they were the ones who interpreted the Holy Quran. So again, their teachings, and this is something that I personally discovered as well, their teachings have been recorded in these books that very often as a Sunni you're told to keep away from, you're told not to read them because you'll be misguided. But when you do read them, you discover, really an ocean of wisdom that I think everyone, Muslim and non-Muslim, could benefit from. And I think, if we are commanded by the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him and his family, to seek knowledge from the cradle to the grave, then it makes sense for us to seek that knowledge within, his own household. And certainly, looking into the history is very important, because this is where people get confused, about what is the true Islam, or what should I follow. And when you start to look into the history and you put the pieces of the puzzle together, and it becomes clearer what happened, then it becomes clear, what is the path to follow. Even if people don't want to, this is always my argument, even if people don't want to accept that, say, the Imams were protected from committing sin, everyone can still benefit from their knowledge, like we've just been talking about the scientific discoveries of Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam. So again, for those years that I was studying when I first converted, I had never heard of Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam, and if it hadn't been for the grace of Allah, I might never have heard of him. And I'll never forget when, in fact, as you were saying, Haji Arif Chandoo, when the birth of Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam falls on the same date as the Holy Prophet. And I remember, the place where I was teaching many years ago, they had a poster up on the birth of the Holy Prophet and Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, and they mentioned both of them on this poster. And I had one of my students who was not an Ithna Ashari student, one of my students came to me and she pointed to Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq's name and she said, "Who's this dude?" And I was thinking, astaghfirullah, you're using this word for this great, light. But why she's using that word is because she's suspicious. She doesn't know who he is. Why is his name coming, under the name of the Holy Prophet? And this is a great loss. I think, for all of us, that they aren't. Nobody knows who they are, because this history has been hidden from the majority. So.
Yeah, he's probably done more to outline and define the Shia Ithna Ashari faith. We are known as Jafari Shias today because of the contribution and the efforts and the struggle of Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam. And I think we can't, if this person does not know, we can't lay the entire blame upon them.
Yeah.
We as the Shia, the population, those who have some knowledge, need to do a lot more to spread his teachings, to talk about his message, to introduce him to the world. And I guess the channel is doing, is helping to do that.
Inshallah, inshallah. Yes, I remember again very, very early days when I had one, Ithna Ashari 12 friend, but I picked up bits, but I didn't really, I didn't realize that there's this whole, again, like I said, ocean out there to be discovered. So, I think, like with regard to what the caller said, rather than worry about, labels that people are giving themselves, the important thing is knowledge. That's the thing about Islam, and that's what it was for me. It's about knowledge. Where do you get your knowledge from? And it's undoubted that you look into the teachings that have been recorded, or the teachings of the Imams Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, and this is knowledge, and this is this is what can benefit humanity, and this is what's important.
Absolutely, and the Shias believe in the main distinction from the Shias from the Sunnis, that we believe in these divinely appointed Imams, one of which we are discussing, the sixth holy Imam. We believe that there were 12 Imams after the Holy Prophet, and we say that it's just uncharacteristic, or it's not normal that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have created the universe in perfection, brought down the religion, sent the Holy Prophet, and then after him left no guide or no leader to guide mankind, to explain the Quran and to guide. And so, but we say that he did do that, and he appointed these Imams, and that when one Imam passed away, he then, through divine guidance, would appoint the next Imam until, of course, we've reached the 12th Imam, which is in occultation today, Imam Mahdi Ajalallahu Ta'ala Faraju Sharif, who shall reappear at a time when Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala so wills to complete the religion of Allah and to bring peace on this world. There's a famous debate. Actually, when we were talking about Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, one atheist once argued with Hisham ibn al-Hakam, one of the students of Imam Sadiq that was trained, about what is the value or the point of an Imam. What is the need for one Imam? So Hisham responded to him, and he said to him, what are the senses in your body? So the man described, he said, I've got eyesight, I can hear, I can smell, I can feel, I can touch. And the man said, what is your point? Hisham says that, how do these senses function? I mean, when you touch something hot, you immediately, your hand moves away from it. You feel the burning, and some message is sent to him, to your hand, to say that remove your hand from this heat. What sends that message? What controls all these senses, or directs these senses, or makes sense of the different senses? It's the brain that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in the human body. So Allah has created all these wonderful senses and organs, but put a leader or a controller in the human body just to make sense of the different bodily parts. Because even as amazing as those organs are and the senses are, it needs a leader or a controlling function. And the Imam, in the same way, exists in the same ways that it deciphers and explains and teaches the lessons and the teachings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
And I think I remember again being told one of the examples of and again, it's crucial that there are these imams to follow, because as again someone gave the example of the cutting of the hand as a punishment for theft, and there have been debates in different schools, and actually it turns out that, again, according to the Imams of Ahlulbayt alayhim salam, it doesn't actually mean the entire hand. It's a little, it's just and this is after obviously like 24 conditions or X number of conditions have been fulfilled. But the other schools have actually interpreted it literally
as cutting
the whole, So, and this is just one example of what can happen if you don't have someone who is divinely guided when it comes to interpreting Sharia. And this is actually what we see happening today, with people just taking it upon themselves to interpret Sharia, and disasters happening left, right, and centre. And so again, I have found, again, looking into teachings of the Imams, that their explanation of Sharia is just a lot more logical, really.
Imam Sadiq alayhi salam's greatest contribution was in jurisprudence, Islamic law, and Sharia, and he had a lot of lessons and a lot of classes on how to interpret the Quran, the Sunnah, the Hadith, when to use Aql, when to use Ijma, and a lot of debates being held with other contemporaries at the time who had different views, who use qiyas in the wrong way to derive law. But I guess, at his time, and if we wonder, the importance of Imam is so important. At the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, we had the Umayyads and in power, and these guys, they had lost all. I mean, they were purely interested in the caliphate. They had no attachment to religion, to promoting Islam, to furthering Islam. They were interested in power, in maintaining the caliphate, in extending their riches, to the extent that the people at that time were fed up and wanted them removed. So we have a situation where, Yazid, after killing Imam Hussein, as we all know, burnt down, puts the horses in the stables, turned the mosque of Medina into a stable for horses, burnt down the Kaaba, and then obviously he passed away. And then from Umayyad they went to Marwan, and and his children, to the extent that at the time when Imam Sadiq alayhi salam was born, we had the ruler which was Walid. Walid actually, once he wanted to take some action, he did istikhara on the Quran. Istikhara, went against what he wanted, and so he took a bow and arrow and he shot the Quran with an arrow. This was the extent of the way their attitude towards Islam, that they had no respect for the Quran, for the Prophet. On another occasion, Walid said that I would just to make a point to these Muslims, I would drink alcohol standing on top of the Kaaba. He had the intention of doing that, but he died before he accomplished that. On another occasion, he said he was copulating with one of his female slaves, and the adhan came, and just to make fun of the Muslims or his followers, he sent his female slave in a state of najasat in his cloak to lead them in Jamaat namaz. So people were getting fed up, and they had enough with these Umayyad rulers. And this was a time of I said, when Imam Sadiq was born, and we found that a lot of revolts were starting in the Muslim empire. Now it was a very interesting situation, because at this time there were a lot of sects also coming into and growing in the Muslim world, and a lot of Muslims coming from Egypt and Iran and Syria, Mesopotamia, were also, as Islam spread, were inquisitive and curious about the religion of Islam, and coming with questions and ideas. A lot of activity was happening in the Muslim world. But what was interesting was that whilst Imam Sadiq was present at the time, we also had other members of the of children of the Ahlulbayt that were also present. So during the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, we had Zayd, which was the son, which was the uncle of Imam Sadiq, the brother of Imam Bakr alayhi salam, Zaydi movement. He was the son of Imam Zain al-Abidin, and he led a revolt, which was a popular revolt against the Umayyads, that he wanted to avenge the killers of Karbala, remove these despotic tyrants. And so he had his movement. Then you had next to him was Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, which was one of the sons of Imam Ali. He was also regarded at that time as a great leader. Some thought that he was the Mahdi, or the Mahdi would be through his family. So he had his followers. Then you had the sons of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, Muhammad ibn Nafs al-Zakiyya, and his father, who also wanted to remove the Umayyads from power. And of course you had then Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. So there were other family members as well, with prominent roles and positions that the Muslims were following, and all of them had different agendas. So Zayd at that time tried to remove Hisham ibn al-Hakam, who was the Umayyad, but he failed after fighting a long battle. He was eventually captured, and he was put on a crucifix, and his body was left for 4 years, just to send a signal to the people who were trying to remove the Umayyads that you shouldn't do this. After he passed away, his son Yahya tried to revive the movement, but he was also caught and put on a crucifix and burnt. At this time, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam was he didn't openly support. He was trying, he had his own divine plan, or the plan from Allah, so he didn't openly support them, but he had his own agenda in terms of promoting knowledge and spreading the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt.
Thank you very much, and that's a very good background history. It is a very fascinating time, you know, in the history of the Muslims. It can teach us a lot about, you know, ourselves today. What is our history, and where are we at today as well? We're just about to go to another break, so we'll see you again, inshallah, in about 3 minutes. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back to Ahlulbayt live on Ahlulbayt TV, where we're talking about the life of Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam on the day, or remembering the day of his martyrdom, when he was finally poisoned by the caliphate of the time, but not before he had actually managed to make a phenomenal contribution to crystallizing Islamic teachings for the benefit of the whole world. So we were just talking about the political circumstances of the time as well.
That's right. So we could say, if you divide Imam Sadiq's life into two, maybe the first half was under the Umayyad rule, and the second was under the Abbasid rule. Now, you know, what helped Imam Sadiq alayhi salam spread knowledge and have the room and the freedom to do so is that, as we were discussing, there are a lot of these movements that were taking place to try, in the first part of his life, to try and remove the Umayyads from power. And of course, the Abbasids, you know, they come from the uncle of Abbas of the Holy Prophet, and in addition to, you know, his cousins and his immediate relatives, as we discussed before the break, the Abbasids were also planning to overthrow the Umayyads. So the Umayyads were busy trying to protect their caliphates, trying to hunt these people down, fight these wars and these battles to stay in power. And because Imam Sadiq alayhi salam refrained himself from joining any of these movements publicly, they never harassed him or went to put him under house arrest or imprisonment. So he had the freedom to spread knowledge and to teach the true teachings of Islam, which other Imams before him never had. Also at the same time, because the religion of Islam was growing rapidly, was reaching new frontiers, lots of new Muslims were coming to the religion. The caliphates needed scholars to try and debate with the atheists, or to try and promote some teaching of Islam, even though they weren't Islamic in themselves or had real but because they wanted the riches and the wealth that these new Islamic empires were bringing, they needed the religion of Islam to, you know, to be explained, to be taught. So these new believers, with their new ideas, could understand the religion. Who had questions could answer. That scholars could answer the questions. So, you know, all this was going on. Now, you know, as a good example, if we look at the Middle East today, and just to give you an understanding of the contribution of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, if we look at the turbulence in the Middle East today, so what's going on in Syria and Iraq and other countries in the Middle East, this is a fraction of what the turbulence was going on at the time of Imam Sadiq. So we today, when we look at the news and we look at what's going on, we think that the Muslim world, the Islamic countries are in turmoil, that people are asking what is true Islam, is what ISIS are doing true Islam, or is it not true Islam? There's all these kind of debates that are going on by non-Muslims, or even Muslims are questioning themselves of where their allegiance should be. So multiply that by 10 times and you'll get an understanding of what was going on at the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Because the current crisis is affecting 1 or 2 countries in the Middle East, or 3. But at that time, it was the Muslim Empire ruled everything from Egypt to Iran to Syria. It was one caliphate that controlled everything. And this caliphate was being attacked by different groups, different parties. They were trying to fight. The Islamic Empire was growing at the same. So all this created confusion and dynamism. And throughout this period, Imam Sadiq was this anchor, you know, pushing out knowledge, you know, pushing out scholars, creating hawzas. It was remarkable that, you know, this was also known as the golden period of Islam, the 2nd century, despite all these different rebellions that were taking place. You know, it's hard to imagine today that whilst the crisis in the world, that, you know, that out of Arabia, there happens to be this massive, you know, surge of knowledge or teaching. You know, it would be difficult to understand how this could happen. But it happened at the time of Imam Sadiq. This was the caliber of the Imam and his teachings, that he was able to, to produce such scholars, such students, that it was known as the golden era.
Also, what is interesting, I'm trying to remember the point I was going to make. I mean, like you say, with regard to the turmoil that was going on, and the fact that he, there were these uprisings, and again, actually, when we look into whether he supported them or he didn't, he often had quite a low-key kind of moral support for them. But at the same time, he knew that, I mean, they insisted on going ahead, so he couldn't stop these movements that wanted to overthrow Bani Umayyah. Although he warned that, you're going to get killed. That's right. Yeah. But like you say, he took advantage of the time to spread this knowledge, and it brings us back to, this question is very relevant for us today. What are our priorities? This is something I've been thinking about. What are your priorities with regard to what you commit to the political situation, and what you commit to increasing knowledge of your deen? And I think that in some ways, studying the deen and gaining knowledge of the deen in order to be able to transmit that, that should not be the interest in the politics should not be at the cost of increasing our knowledge of Islam. And again, around the world, there are many people who, armchair. Everyone's got an armchair kind of interest, in what's happening. But people aren't, they're not trained to go out and join any army, or to assist, in a physical way like that. But again, if we are in lands of relative safety, then we can take that opportunity. Okay, what am I going to do with this time? This is the time for me to study and increase my deen, so that I can pass that on to the next generation, so that all these people who think they're going to wipe out the Shia by mass assassinations, well, there's just going to be a whole new generation coming up. So, we need to be planning for the next generation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, part of the problem is ignorance that exists, and people have misconceptions about different sects and different schools. And I think, by gaining knowledge and by teaching that knowledge, you're removing those misconceptions. You explain the similarities between humanity and different sects, so people are less likely to be violent or towards one another. And I think Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, obviously he was divinely guided, and he knew that a lot of these movements were going to fail. But he also knew that he had an important task, which was to, whilst all this turmoil was going on, whilst Islam was at a very young age, whilst, before him, as we all know, Muawiyah and Yazid killed a lot of the scholars who had true knowledge. There weren't many scholars around. He had this opportunity to ground Islam, to establish Islam, to distinguish Islam and its true teachings. He was not going to miss that opportunity, and he overturned every stone to try, and he debated with the atheists, with the theologians. He contributed to chemistry, to physics, to mathematics. In every he says that he had knowledge of 500 sciences. Now people say, how does someone know 500 sciences don't exist? But in those days, mathematics wasn't, for example, one science. Trigonometry, algebra, calculus were all individual sciences. They were known as individual sciences. And he had this, he was divinely guided. He was divinely inspired with this knowledge, and he made contributions to as many sciences. He was also the father of Irfan. A lot of people, Gnostics, traced their teachings back to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. There wasn't any particular science which he left out, and he used the opportunity to really spread the teachings of Islam, and further humanity and development of humanity.
And of course, again, very famously, we have Abu Hanifa and Imam Malik as well, were his students. And again, I mean, I remember sort of reading some statement online. I think very early on there was someone went to a scholar, again, someone from the other, schools of thought, and went to one of their scholars and said, what do you recommend about what we study about Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam? This scholar replied, well, everything that you need to know about Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam you can find in the work of Imam Malik. Now, I find this quite a strange answer, because if you want to find out about Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam, then surely you go to Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam. And so this is another interesting period with regard to those who were studying under him, some of the more prominent names, and his relations with them as well, and how he sort of interacted. And this is again something that can benefit the audience, is to again, we see some of these discussions going on in Al-Kafi, between, for example, Abu Hanifa and Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam. You can see how they interacted with each other and the discussions.
I think Abu Hanifa, this is found in Sunni and Shia books, that he says that if it wasn't for the 2 years that I spent in the dars, in the class of Imam Sadiq, I would have been ruined. He says this himself. Imam Malik, has long narrations about the virtues and the piety and the knowledge and the character of Imam Sadiq, and what a great figure he was. Imam Malik says that every time the Prophet's name would be mentioned, Imam Sadiq would turn pale out of reverence and respect for the Prophet. He would never do any dars. These are from Imam Malik, without being in the state of wudu. He was always in the state of wudu. He goes, once I accompanied Imam Sadiq, we were together for Hajj, and we all did the talbiyah, the labbaik, and we were waiting. Imam Sadiq had not done his, and I went to him. Imam Malik says, oh Imam, what are you waiting for? He says, I am fearful that what if I hear the words la labbaik, because of the fear and the awe that Imam Sadiq had for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the devotion that he had in worship. So they all in their books and in their works to speak very highly of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And Abu Hanifa also, you find in a lot of literature, he mentions the lessons and the knowledge that he gained at the classes of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And
we have a narration here as well, which appears in the history books. Again, this conversation between Abu Hanifa and Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, and it says that Abu Hanifa remarked that if Imam Sadiq alayhi salam did not teach 3 things, he would be able to accept him. That good is from God and evil is from the deeds of men. And Abu Hanifa said, whereas I say that men have no choice, but both good and evil are from God. And then number 2, in the final judgment, the devil suffers in the fire, according to Imam al-Sadiq, whereas Imam Abu Hanifa says, whereas I say that the fire will not burn him in so much as the same material will not injure itself. Shaitan being created from fire, so how could he be affected by fires of Jahannam? And then the 3rd point, it is impossible to see, according to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, it is impossible to see Allah in this world or the next. Whereas Abu Hanifa said that anyone who has existence may be seen, if not in this world, then in the next. And then we have one of the companions of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, as it says, Sheikh Bahlul, who was one of his companions, picked up a clod of earth and hit Abu Hanifa on the head, declaring as he made the hasty exit that all 3 points are refuted. So Abu Hanifa made a complaint about him to the Caliph, who called Bahlul before him and said, why did you throw the clod of earth at Abu Hanifa? And he answered, I didn't throw it. Abu Hanifa said, you did throw it. And Bahlul said, you yourself have maintained that evil is from God, and that men have no choice. So why do you blame me? And you've also said that the same material will not injure itself. Shaitan is from fire, and the fire of hell could not hurt him. Accordingly, you are from the dust of the earth. So tell me, how could I injure you? And you have claimed that you can see God as proof of his existence. Show me the pain you are complaining about that exists in your head. And so he didn't have an answer to that. This is just, a small example of, obviously there was a lot of discussion going on with regard to, theology and Aqidah.
Yeah, these were typical of the kind of debates that were taking on. They were Imam Sadiq alayhi salam had trained his students to be masters in debating, in answering questions. So I mean, Bahlul, is famous because he pretended to be, mad or funny, but he was very intellectual in his responses, as we can see. But all of Imam Sadiq's students were, Hisham ibn Hakam, Zurair, being another one. All of them were really masters in, a particular field, whether theology or logic or jurisprudence, or some of them, had, memorized 30,000 hadith from Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, some of his students. It says that the hadith from Imam Sadiq and Imam Baqir, their quantity are more than the hadith from them than all the other Imams combined, including the Holy Prophet. So really, you can see at that time the opportunity that they had to teach, that the amount of knowledge that they were able to disseminate was far greater than all the teachings of all the other Imams combined.
And of course, this again is an encouragement to everyone to read and explore their narrations again, because we're living in a time when, again, people are not reading so much as they used to. I think none of us have the time to read like perhaps 10, 20 years ago. But there's so much to be gained from reading about the teachings of Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam and Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, certainly to again get a much clearer understanding of walaya, and also I think what Imam Sadiq alayhi salam provided was a lot of logical answers to questions that we still have today. This is what I found, that the questions that we still have today about the deen, or that I hear from people as well, I notice have already been answered by Imam Jaffar as-Sadiq alayhi salam. When you read
absolutely right. He inspired a whole generation of Islamic intellectuals. The famous chemist Jabir ibn Hayyan, who did so much in the field of chemistry, physics, mathematics, was a student of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. So a whole generation was inspired through his knowledge and his teachings, and the knowledge that exists, that's been translated in English, is out there and available, as you mentioned, for us to read. And we'll find that a lot of the questions, the queries that we have today are nothing new. They were asked in a lot more detail at that time, and were answered in a very professional and rational and logical way by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam.
So we've just got a few minutes, so perhaps we can go into the issue of his martyrdom, because like I said, in quite a few contemporary accounts of Shiite Islam written by scholars in the West, they cast doubt on the fact that many of the Imams were actually poisoned. So this is again something that is kind of being directed at the 12 school, that, it was all a bit made up.
I mean, I think, anybody who says that is being prejudiced and unfair, because, the history books are full of incidents and narrations of members of the family of the Holy Prophet being annihilated and killed. I mean, Karbala is mentioned in all the books as an example that the caliphates at the time feared most. Were the family of the Holy Prophet. I mean, at the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, Mansur, the caliph of the latter years, at one point he gathered 75 Hassanid Sayyids, made them wear iron collars, and behead them at one go. 75. It says that Imam Sadiq, when he was taken to the place, a bit like the barbarism that we're seeing today that's going on, but these were Hassanid Sayyids, were killed at one go by Mansur. He says that he nearly died, Imam Sadiq. He got a fever. He was ill for 20 days. He did not come up because of what he witnessed. He says that Mansur used their bones and their flesh in the walls of buildings. This was the barbarism of the caliphs at the time when it came to attacking or killing the followers of Ahlulbayt and the family of the Holy Prophet. When it came to Imam Sadiq himself, Mansur was the caliph in the last part of his life. tried many attempts to take the life of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Once he says five separate attempts are recorded in history, but once he asked 100 ignorant men to ambush Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, because men who didn't know who he was.
Right.
And when they came and confronted him with their swords, just by seeing the piety and the virtue and the goodness in his face, all of them bowed down before Imam Sadiq alayhi salam and converted and became his followers. This was indeed a miracle, because Mansour was very upset, that they didn't take his life. On another occasion, it said that he asked for his house to be burnt down, and out of miracle, Imam Sadiq and his family escaped. And one of the companions, they write in the history books, he saw Imam Sadiq sitting outside his house weeping and crying. He says, "Why are you crying? Your family are safe." He said, "I don't cry for myself or my possessions or my house, but I am remembering the tents of Karbala, when Imam Sajjad and Lady Zainab and the women and children, when their tents were set on fire, how difficult that situation was." But it says that the poison, finally, that his life was taken by giving him poisonous grapes. But this was no ordinary poison. When Imam Ali alayhi salam was killed, it is said that his daughter was taken to the killer who struck him on his head, and he said that, "You think that you have injured my father by striking him on the head, that you could kill him?" And the killer said, "I have administered such poison that on the sword and struck him with it, that if I had hit 1,000 people, each of them would have died with that poison." Imam Hassan was given a level of poison even greater than that. And of course, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, in his poison, it said that melted his skin. The level of the poison he was given that melted his skin, and he passed away.
Thank you very much, Haji Arif Chandoo, and thank you for watching.
Ahlulbayt TV, the holy household for